Rubbish, like, what's happening?
Okay, I think we're live. I'm just trying to go live too. Okay, I'm clicking the button.
Same, tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready when you are. I just can't look at myself because I'm mirrored the other way. So I'm seeing a weird. I'm fine. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just start with the introduction so you have time to set
Sure.
up. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Sanrachri Kavalagoda, and I'm honored to welcome you to today's Fireside Conversation, the final session in our series. For those who may not be familiar with Breaking Silence movement, we are a nonprofit committed to advocate for gender justice, supporting survivors of gender-based violence, and fostering critical conversations that drive awareness and change. Throughout our fireside conversations, we had leaders, activists, and experts working in the front lines of these issues. And today we are closing out this series. We and we're turning our focus to a topic that is more pressing than ever, which is online safety, digital exploitation, and protecting children in the digital age. The internet has transformed how we connect, learn, and engage with the world, but alongside these opportunities come serious risks, particularly for children who are often most vulnerable for online exploitation abuse. For social media dangers in hidden threats in digital spaces, it is critical that we equip parents, caregivers, and communities with the tools to safeguard young people, and that is exactly what we are so fortunate to be joined today by someone who has dedicated her career to exposing and combating these dangers. It is my absolute privilege to introduce Roo Powell, an advocate, investigator, and founder of Safe from Online Sex Abuse, SOSA, a nonprofit working to raise awareness and take direct action against online children exploitation. Rue's work is at the intersection of technology, law enforcement, and child safety, where she conducts undercover operations, trains officials, and works alongside law enforcement to identify and apprehend online predators. She is also a leading voice in the fight for stronger policies and community education on how to protect children in digital spaces. Many of you may know Rue from the groundbreaking docuseries Undercover Underage, which follows her and her team in real life as they collaborate with law enforcement to expose online predators. Season 1 and Season 2 are currently available on Max, and her latest project, SOSA Undercover, is set to premiere on YouTube on the 20th of March, bringing its critical work to an even wider audience. Rue's efforts has been featured in Forbes, CNN Philippines, Newsweek, and Wall Street Journal, The Independent, Good Morning America, Dr. Phil, The Daily Beast, and many more. She is a sought-out writer, speaker, and advocate using her platform to drive awareness, change laws, and empower communities to take action. We are so honored to have you here and here with us today and share our insights um, share your insights and expertise. Rue, welcome to the Fireside Conversation and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off things, how about you give us a little bit of a background about your work as well as SOSA?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. I started SOSA in 2020, and we're a nonprofit that focuses on the prevention and intervention of sex abuse in all its forms, particularly online sex abuse and how that kind of evolves. And it's been a real honor to be in this space, to be helping to navigate these sort of uncharted waters.
Mhm.
And that has been, gosh, a major part of what I've been doing now for the past 5, 6 years.
That's amazing. So what led you to this work with, online safety specifically?
I was working in tech, and prior to that, I had experience in my career as a writer and advocate. Whether I was writing specifically about a lot of times, violence against women. I worked with different NGOs and organizations and traveled
Hmm.
to write about human trafficking and sex crimes and things that sort of just affect
Yeah.
the world's most vulnerable populations. And I didn't grow up with a smartphone in my hand, so my parents were only concerned about people that were within close proximity to me. They didn't. They only had to worry about whoever was in, within a mile radius, right, or whoever was on my way walking to the school bus or walking back, or. And now you have to kind of worry about, this generation of parents has to worry about people that are in another state or another country. So you no longer have to be in the same room as a child in order to abuse a child, and that feels incredibly dangerous, but also scary. Like, how do we navigate that? So at one point, as an experiment, I was working at a tech company, and the team and we put a pretend teenager online so we could kind of demonstrate the ubiquity of online predation, and that went like wildfire. And it made me realize, like, this specific aspect of tech and online safety, and it's sort of this, like, the Venn diagram of those things kind of landed in me at online sex abuse and exploitation.
Wow, amazing. Um, so in your experience, how would you say that online threats and digital forms of GBV, gender-based violence, have evolved over the years?
Oh gosh, I mean, it evolves in such a way, like the way that CSAM, child sex abuse material, what legally is known as child porn, the way that that started was a way that you could really be it was easy to get caught because you had to develop
Hmm.
photos. You had to put them in an envelope. You had to put them in the mail. You had to meet up in person, and there was a transaction. But now you can download. Like, there was a lot of risk involved. Now there's a lot less risk for someone to be a part of, whether it's creating, disseminating,
Hmm.
or purchasing CSAM. It's you've got all these keyboard cowboys that are hiding behind the privacy of a screen, and that's what's protecting them. So yeah, it's a lot different. Before, perpetrators had to definitely be bold, and definitely dealt with a really strong element of risk that seems to be absent now in 2025.
That's fair. Wow. So what would you say are the biggest, challenges when addressing these online predators and protecting vulnerable individuals?
Um, my biggest challenges in general, or yeah, so it's interesting because online predation can be sneaky, or I think, like, at
Yeah.
first blush you can be an adult looking at a phone and not necessarily know that this is a conversation that is going down a wrong path. I think they can almost read as innocuous from the outset, and it takes some digging to understand, okay, this is actually grooming. What's happening here is this person is sort of preparing this child to be harmed in some way down the road. It's not necessarily an immediate red flag for, I think, a person to see a conversation like, oh, this person's being really nice, and then you get the context of, oh, they're actually 20 years older and they're pretending to be younger, or they're actually being really manipulative, and it seems like they're being nice but they're not, and so on.
Wow, that's so true. That resonates so much. And what would you say that, tech companies, policymakers, and social platforms, what can they do to safeguard their users better?
Mm. You know, I would say that it's difficult because, lots of platforms will say, well, we age gate it. You have to be 13 plus to use our platform. You have to be 18 plus. Well, unfortunately, kids know how to do math. So they know how to make themselves, like, when you're, for me, I go
Yeah.
to choose my birth date, and, you choose the year. I'm doing a big Price is Right spin, and that wheel is, and then I get to my year. All kids have to do is bump up that year a couple
Hmm.
numbers, and they're good to go.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, especially within the past couple of years, there has been less of an investment specifically in tech companies and trust and safety. And either they're using AI or they're kind of putting the onus on the user, when realistically, if they have a platform, if they have a social media platform, a gaming platform, an art platform, any app, any platform where there's some sort of chat capability, if they have a platform that they're marketing, then the responsibility is on them to make that platform safe for their users, their 13-year-old users and whomever. So I do think that there is a huge level of responsibility that's being shirked by tech companies. And I think that when those companies, went through some financial struggles right after COVID, they still, to make trust and safety their first cuts doesn't make sense, because you need to protect your users. So that's one part of it. Like, I would also love to see things happen on the legislative side, just around like very, very basic things. Like, I would love to see the age of consent raised to 18 in most states. In most states, the age of consent is 16. So as long as you're 16, you can go ahead and be in a relationship with an 80-year-old. And if 18 is sort of the arbitrary age that we decide someone's an adult and they can vote and they can join the military, then that should also be the age where they're making decisions about, what kind of adult they want to be in a relationship with.
Yeah. I do want to touch on content creators kind of putting their children out on their content. What are your thoughts with that?
That is a hard one. That is a hard one because, a lot of these people are making a living off this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, when I was younger and I was writing online, and I loved just having like a little blog or a little Instagram page where I'm posting pictures of my kids, and it all seemed so innocuous. Now I feel like I know too much, and I do not post any photos of my kids online, and I kind of have strict measures with them around their social media usage. Um, we see I see what happens, or I see what people are using as material. There are perpetrators who just love, I mean, I feel like everything I'm about to say should come with a trigger warning, but and so forgive me, what I'll say now is a little dark, but there are people that are going online, there are these perpetrators that are going online who are looking at hashtags like potty training and splish splash, or like fun in the sun, or sprinkler time, because they want to see kids getting ready, like toddlers getting ready to go in a bathtub, or playing out in a sprinkler, or just wearing a diaper, or whatever. And so you kind of think that, I think when people think about abuse, they think like a certain age is sort of exempt from this, right? Like, okay, well, certainly that's too young, or certainly this age group is safe from somebody who would want to harm them. But realistically, like when we're talking toddlers and babies too, like, yeah, I don't post anything anymore, and I wish I never did. But I also just feel like I know too much now.
Ah, That's so It's so scary to hear that. And I feel like it's good that you're being specific, because I feel like a lot of us don't know what to look out for, because we're like, oh, that's like you said, it's innocent, right? But sometimes it probably isn't as innocent as we think it is.
Well, it's so innocuous. And even like there's all this like wonderful, beautiful content of like wonderfully talented children, whether they're dancing or doing gymnastics, or, but unfortunately, bad actors, the worst types of people, will go on and will pause a video of a
Mm,
kid doing a gymnastics team where maybe like their legs are in the air in some sort of like precarious way in that freeze frame moment, or a leotard is fitting a certain way. And that freeze frame is providing them with some gratification. And that's
yeah.
why, like, ages ago, YouTube wanted, said no more comments on kid created content, because people are saying, hey, pause at 2:47 so you can see this image that I'm now finding titillating. So it's a shame, because I actually think the internet's a great place. It's where we can learn things and share fun videos and talk with each other like you and I are talking now, and keep up with culture and events. But in these cases, you have to also realize there are some bad
Mm.
actors.
That's fair. So we're moving on to our segment three, which is prevention and advocacy. What are some things that individuals and communities can do to protect themselves from digital exploitation?
I think that, I mean, I would love to just say, just don't talk to anyone you don't know online, but that's where sometimes people find community, right? So if I'm really into crochet and there's not a ton of people in my town that crochet, I'm going to join some sort of crochet forum to talk crochet, right? So I don't think that like just don't ever talk to strangers is necessarily the answer, for at least for adults too. But I think that the best thing that we can do is really sort of raise awareness about what can happen online. So, um, you're never going to be able to stop your kid from necessarily being exposed to something somewhere somehow. Because even if you say, hey, my kid's not going to get a cell phone, they don't have a laptop, they're not allowed online. All right, well, my kids' schools
Mm,
issue them laptops. And all right, but maybe your friend's sitting next to somebody on the bus with a phone, or your friend is going over someone else's house and your kid's going over someone else's house and they've got an iPad. So I don't think the move is to just say no social media, no devices altogether. If people decide that, that's fine. But I think having those skills is important because you're going to come across it at some point. So even if my daughters didn't have phones or before they had phones, I would still say, hey, here are some things to watch out for online. Hey, by the way, if you come across something strange, let me know and raise your hand and we'll talk about it. So I think having those open conversations with kids in your life, whether you're a parent or a caregiver or a cool aunt or something else, is deeply important.
that's amazing. So just following up with that question, um, like you said, like closest families and friends can help as well. But also like what can, parents, educators, advocacy groups, what can they kind of do to create safer online spaces?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, one thing that I would suggest, first of all, is see what the laws are in your state and how they can be
Hmm.
improved, and speak with the legislator if possible. So some states have a grooming statute and some states don't. Some states it's wrong to talk to a kid in a creepy manner or to sexualize something about a child or say, send me photos of your feet or whatever. Or I'm really fantasizing about being in a relationship with you. There are some places where that is creepy, but it's not a crime. It's creepy for a 50-year-old to talk to a 12-year-old and say, I love you and I want to be with you forever. And I think you're so beautiful. And one day we're going to whatever. Like
Yeah.
I'm leaving out all the sexual content, but that's implied where that's not a crime and it feels like it should be. And then in some states, it is a crime. You shouldn't be talking to a child in a sexual manner. So I think, like, even starting with that, like, how do you make the laws in your state safer for kids? What's the age of consent in your state? What are the penalties for owning CSAM, or possessing CSAM or distributing CSAM? I think all those things are important. And then also, like, in your schools, if your schools are handing out Chromebooks, what kind of safety measures do they have? Are they doing like a safety class in school too? Do they have some sort of monitoring program happening? What are they doing to mitigate risk before a device ever ends up in a kid's hand? So I think all those things are solid ways for communities to kind of shore up how their kids are interacting online.
That's fair. Do you think like warning kids and kind of like making sure they know about, what's out there, that can be something bad out there? Do you think that works as well?
Yeah, I look, and I know people don't want to scare kids, but like if your kid is old enough to use a phone and ride a school bus, they've already heard a lot.
Mm,
They already know so much. So don't be afraid to have those conversations, and we have them in age appropriate ways. So when my daughter was 7, I had a very different conversation with her than when she was 10, and then again 13, and then again
yeah,
16. These are, I mean, I think, you just have age appropriate conversations. But if they're old enough to use an iPad, yeah, they got to be old enough to know sometimes people are tricky online and you have to be careful about that. And here's what you should do. And here's when you should tell a trusted adult.
yeah. I think parents just want to protect their kids, but they just don't know how. much they've already been exposed to. So it's safer to have that conversation rather than not. Um,
Absolutely.
and what do you think are the most urgent policy changes or industry shifts needed to combat digital gender-based violence?
I think that we can talk about just, there are different laws in terms of service that different platforms can have. But ultimately, I think the points that I made about just making sure that a platform's
Hmm.
users are protected, whether that means making sure you have actual moderators and you're not just hoping that, an AI algorithm is doing the heavy lifting, making sure that laws are safe or holding the right people to task. I think all those things are right in line with what I've been saying about just like making sure that communities are making these platforms and making these areas of I mean, we call them like the internet, like it's some amorphous thing, but the internet is part of our daily lives. So making that safe for everyone is so
Hmm.
important.
That's fair. And how would you say are some of the best ways that survivors and victims can advocate for, stronger digital protections?
Yeah, I think, if you're concerned about a specific platform, asking that platform about trust and safety, talking with legislators specifically about laws that protect kids online and, in turn in real life, are important. And then also just being like, what can you do to be a safe adult in someone else's life? Like, is there something that you can do at a school? Is there a something that you can offer at your local library on online safety? What are some things that can be done? Just look, it's going to depend, right? It's going to
Hmm.
depend based on where you are and what's available and whether it's like hyper local or not. But even just like in your school, what can be done in your school to make sure that kids are getting the support they need?
That's fair. Where can if someone wants to do this and they don't know where to kind of start, where would you, advise them to start at?
I think just understanding. So we've got resources on SOSA's website. Our website is sosatogether.org. We also have resources on our Instagram. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children also has some great resources, including a take it down tool if somebody experiences somebody, either extorting them or using their images in a sort of an unsafe way. So definitely SOSA, definitely NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Perfect. Okay. So, in your opinion, what can everyday people do to kind of support online safety efforts and survivors advocacy? I think you can be as, specific or detailed as possible because, the more people know, I think the more people can actually advocate for others.
I think the biggest thing that we can do to advocate for people is to immediately call out victim blaming the second you hear it. Victim blaming is a disease and it
Hmm.
can really damage it can damage a kid, it can damage a victim, but also it's what prevents so many people from coming forward because that age old what was she wearing it translates to, well, what was she posting, what was she commenting online, or what was she like, why was she even on the internet anyway, like why does she even have a phone? There's so much victim blaming that happens with online abuse and exploitation, and I think it's one of the things that's really keeping perpetrators safe because they know like, hey, if you go tell your parents or if you go tell a teacher, you're going to get in trouble too. You are listening, I told you to do those things, but you're the one that listened to me, so that's on you, instead of acknowledging that, of course in these cases it's an adult manipulating a child, and that's all there is to it. So I think really, really being a staunch supporter of survivors and somebody who will boldly claim that like victim blaming is wrong, I think is so important. Not only is it important, it's so validating for survivors to
Hmm.
hear that, and it gives people like just a little bit more courage to speak up if they've been harmed in some way.
Right. So do you think that having that, online conversation with kids, do you think that kind of creates a safe space for the kids to kind of come to you and be like, hey, there's something happening online. This does not sound right. Do you think that creates that sort of safe space for them?
I think so, and a lot of it has to do with the way that I parent. I'm a mom, and I know that being raised in, I know many of your listeners will understand, like being raised by a Filipina woman who is wonderful, and I love her, but then I would never have told her anything, because if something like this was happening to me online, I felt like I could have never told anyone. I would have taken that to the grave with me, because I just didn't feel like there was something that I could say, hey, this terrible thing happened. I would have just stayed super quiet about it. So I think I've tried to just sort of like course correct based on how I've seen me and my peers be raised. And so I think I have a good relationship with my daughters, where I encourage them to just like come to me with things. And, I try to stay even keel if they're telling me something that is upsetting, and just stay as supportive as I can, while also, guiding them. What I don't want is, I'll explain it like this. Like, I have 3 daughters, and my kids are teens now. And if something happens, I don't want them to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. Mom can never find out. Like, mom cannot find out. I want them to say, oh my gosh, this thing happened. Let's call mom. She'll know what to do. That's the difference that I want. And if I can be the latter for them all the time, then I feel like I've done my job, because abuse is so awful, and it's so sad, and it's so isolating, and it's so harmful. I don't want any kid to go through that alone. They need someone in their corner. They need someone that's going to support them and comfort them and say, I'm so sorry this happened to you. This wasn't your fault. Here's what we're going to do. That's what kids need. And I think that if we can be that for kids, then we're heading in the right direction.
It's amazing because I feel like so many of us just know how lonely it can be when, when it was happening to us, and I'm glad we're having this conversation and, trying to make it safer for next generations.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I know if somebody had, messaged me when I was younger, I wasn't around. I mean, Snapchat wasn't around when I was small, but sent me some, terrible photo that is abusive in
mhm,
nature, I I would have like probably just thrown my phone across the room and not told anyone about it. Or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
it felt like I can't, somehow this is gonna be my fault, or they're
Mhm.
just gonna take my phone away, or it's gonna be like, why were you talking to that person to begin with? And I would rather have just suffered in silence rather than suffer in shame.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've done that so many times.
Yeah.
But I do want to touch a little bit about the cultural nuances that we were speaking about earlier before the live started, how this kind of affects, like, how have you seen over the years it affecting different cultures, different ethnicities, different communities? Um, do they differ? Is it kind of like the same context? What have you seen?
Well, I think that so kids are going to be targeted online irrespective of gender,
Hmm.
sexuality, race, socioeconomic status, etc. I have found, I have gone to Southeast Asia, and I've gone into brothels with undercover investigators who are, dealing with crimes based on trafficking, right? Trafficking
Hmm.
of underage people. So anyone under the age of 18. And there is some overlap when we look at online abuse as well, in that as a Southeast Asian woman, I see so much fetishization happening. Fetishization to the point of like dehumanization. When you're talking about a child and you're talking about, in some cases, like a young Asian girl, it's become like when I was younger, back in the whatever, the 1900s,
Hmm.
when I was younger, that was a punchline, right? Like a punchline where people are quoting Full Metal Jacket, and it's just a punchline about Asian sex workers, or a punchline about what Asian women are supposed to be, subservient,
Hmm.
etc. Do I see that translate sometimes into these chat rooms, and when our decoys are getting messages? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There is definitely some of that. And even when, I was with this group of investigators and we're talking about different parts of different countries where sex work is legal, even still, I don't want to say that specific races were dehumanized in some way, but it was like, oh, yes, well, there's this type of sex worker and this type of sex worker. But if you get a sex worker from whatever Southeast Asian country, then you can kind of do anything you want. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
this level of like definitely dehumanization and degradation that happens. And maybe it's less prominent in certain areas, surely, like geographically, like and just like based on just different cultures and like whatever part of whatever country you're in, that varies. But we've certainly seen that online as well. What kind of person is uh, calling that out specifically? And I
Mm-hmm.
was talking with you and Allie about like, yeah, just even current day 2025 being on the receiving end of racial epithets is still like, like that's interesting. Like, are you specifically, I'll pause there. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to finish that sentence, but you understand what I'm
That's
saying.
fair.
Like there's
Yeah,
plenty of
absolutely.
that I still see happening.
Absolutely. Have you worked with policymakers, have you collaborated with them to kind of, you know, get this into policy and, what is sort of the reaction?
So generally speaking, when it comes to policy in the United States, like going federal is kind of not the way to go about things. A lot of places you have to kind of go state by state.
Mm-hmm.
So in the state of Connecticut, where SOSA is based, we did help pass a law. I guess 2023 now, and it was the act of sort of it was essentially a grooming statute. It was the act of communicating with a minor in a sexual manner, making that illegal. And while that's not like a panacea, right? Like that's just kind of a bit of a band-aid. It's the move as a step in the right direction. We've also spoken with legislators in other states about passing similar laws. Sometimes those kind of get wrapped up into bigger packages around
Mm,
online safety. And so sometimes they don't always make it to where we hope they'll make it. But in a perfect world, if we had all the time in the world, yeah, I'd love to see certain laws get passed in every state and then, God willing, federally.
that's fair. Um, okay, so do you have any like final messages or insights for individuals working to fight online exploitation?
Yeah, I think that if you're if you're in this space, like bless you entirely. It is a hard space to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the work can be really tough, but I think the work that we're doing is so good and it's so important. And just kind of remembering that what we're doing here is helping to protect the world's most vulnerable, right? Like we've given people access to each other, which is a beautiful thing, but also on the other side of it can be a really scary thing. So just staying the course, I think, and taking care of ourselves and each other is so important.
Right. That's so amazing. I do have one more question. So I feel like we talk a lot about preventing and mitigating in terms of, safe spaces and for children to, reach out to people, but how can we kind of stop it or nip it at the bud? Is it is it a collaboration? Is it like, do we go to law enforcement? Is it communities that can, help stop this? Like, what needs to happen there?
Do you mean like as a whole in a specific case, or
I
I'm
think as a whole, just to like stop, online harassment.
yeah. So in a perfect world, like you and I we would not have jobs, right? In a perfect world, like there would be no need for SOSA. In a perfect world, unfortunately, the world is not lacking people who wish to harm others.
Mm,
And the internet is kind of a safe way for them to do that because it's one thing to go up to someone in person and harm them, and quite another to kind of start grooming them online. I think that Could there be some, in a perfect world, could there be some amazing hotline, text line that says, hey, where you can call and say, hey, I keep wanting to reach out to 13-year-olds online. What can I do? Yes, let's look at it from that front. I think that would be great. Is there is there a way to, I can't think of anything that doesn't violate our rights as our right
Yeah,
to privacy. But I think that all of these things, it's not going to be one thing that really moves the needle. It is going to be the aggregate of all of our efforts together across a number of different fronts that's really going to change the way that we are looking at things online, but also is going to keep kids safe.
that's fair. Okay, so to end this segment off, what is next for SOSA and how can how can we help support your work?
Thank you. Yeah. So next, our new show, SOSA Undercover, is launching on Thursday on YouTube. You can subscribe now and sort of check out the channel. We've got some great content on there. And so Undercover Underage, we've got 2 seasons of that on Max. And SOSA Undercover is where Undercover Underage is left off. So this is where we're picking up where it left off. And so it'll be very good. And you can follow us online on social, all the places. If you'd like to donate to SOSA, please do. We are funded by individual donors. Yeah,
Amazing. I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that.
great. Yeah, I think it's. I've seen some of the episodes so far. They're excellent. I think people will be pleased.
Amazing. Okay, so I think it's time for our Q&A session with the live audience. Sorry,
No problem.
let me see.
Mm. Also, just
Okay.
if people have questions and they're not available or they don't want to ask right now, or we are available at SOSA. We've got a great team at SOSA. There's a small but mighty team. So feel free to DM SOSA. We're at SOSA Together, or you can DM me as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Any final words,
No,
Rue?
but thank you so much for having me. Thank you for letting me yap at you. And thank you for your support of SOSA.
Amazing. Um, the, anyone who's listening, they can also reach out to Breaking Silence Movement as well. We have a triage form. We have more information on our LinkedIn tree. You can reach that to the link in our bio. And to end things, Rue, thank you so much for this incredible conversation and the work you do. Your insights, your dedication, and work you do every day to protect children and combat online exploitation are nothing short of inspiring. Your advocacy has not only helped bring predators to justice, but also has empowered families, communities, and policymakers to take action. We are so grateful for the time and for sharing your expertise with us today. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you, our audience, for tuning in, engaging, and being a part of this important discussion. Conversations like this are just the beginning. A real change happens when we take what we've learned and put it into action. If today's discussion resonates with you, we encourage you to continue to support the fight against online exploitation. We can learn more about SOSA's work, supporting their mission, and watch the upcoming docuseries SOSA Undercover, premiering on March 20th on YouTube. Let's all do our part in making the internet safer, a safer place for children. At Breaking Silence Movement, we remain committed to advocating for survivors, pushing systemic change, and fostering critical conversations like this one. If you want to continue being a part of these discussions, join us for our upcoming coffee chat events, where we'll be diving into gender based violence in Black and Latino communities. And mark your calendars on March 30th, we're unveiling the next chapter of Breaking Silence with our brand launch. We can't wait to share the exciting news with you. Stay connected with us, continue these conversations beyond today, and let's work together to create a world where every person, especially the vulnerable, can live free from gender based violence. Thank you all again for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you again, Roo. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.